Hello and welcome. My name is Pat Milani, and this is my ethical and moral leadership presentation on the 50% floor. The 50% grading floor, being a piece of the grading for equity concept, has moved more into the central discussion here since the COVID shutdown and since schools were sent into a number of different settings for teaching and assessing and providing the learning to students. This concept was brought forth with the idea of addressing some of the gaps in students turning in work and being able to provide opportunities for those students to still show their learning and earn a passing grade and an acceptable grade, even though there might be that gap where the low grades start to shut down some students and start to dig some holes where if a student is at a 10 or a 20%, for example, it's a long jump in what is argued as could be an imbalanced grading scale, with 0 to 60 all being considered an F. But we're going to look at today at what cost may this be implemented. The first of the 5 ethical and moral lenses we're going to touch on is utilitarianism. Could be summed up into the greatest good for the greatest number of people. While looking through this lens with the 4 aspects of coming to a conclusion in this lens is what are we considering as the greatest number of people and students with low Fs compared to the rest of the students. So if we really look at numbers and the greatest number of people, there are a large number of students that would never really enter into needing this situation where they're putting in maximum effort. They have resources both at home and in the classroom where this typically isn't an issue. And then the greatest number of people would be bringing in the conversation to that small percentage of students in the low F range. And then what message is being sent across the board to students in each direction with this 50% floor in play. Kant's categorical imperative brings in the idea of doing what is right no matter the consequences. Well, to me, the recurring question in that situation in this approach is, well, what is right? Well, they have a couple ways. Kant has a couple ways in this approach. Would I want everyone else to make the same decision I did? And always respecting the dignity of others. Well, again, looking through this lens, we're sitting at the idea of, again, what is right? And can a 50% grading floor be right for all? And we have to look at that, breaking it down even more, is this a per student conversation? Is it right for all students? Or are we looking at more of per content area? Does it really make sense in all content areas? And coming from a math background, the discussion that we have in this situation is when we're grading in, let's say, a math assessment, you're looking at how much of these learning goals are the students able to master? What percentage of them, or at what spot on the scale are they mastering these levels? And if you have a student that is clearly lacking in a specific goal, they don't understand basic knowledge of that specific goal or application of it, then what would be a 0 in terms of understanding, or maybe a low percentage of understanding, is automatically at the 50%. And at that point, what is that grade scale really saying? Justice as fairness, as the third approach, looks similarly to the utilitarianism in the fact that providing greatest benefit to the least advantaged members. So in this situation, we can kind of compare it to that utilitarianism where who's qualifying as the least advantaged members. So back to utilitarianism, what's the greatest number of people? When that percentage of students with the low F that this is in place to assist, we're really talking about a small number of students. And then how is this actually affecting those students? And again, what is that grade at that point actually reflecting? In pragmatism, we've got the process of moral decision making. So we're looking here through this lens at really kind of a scientifical and philosophical approach. It mentions in the text as the scientific method being put into play in this concept. Could be the most applicable lens of the 5 in this scenario based on just the sole purpose of the decision-making process. There's a lot of inquiry and decision inquiry and discussion needed to make this decision is where it's going to be applicable, is it beneficial, and who is it affecting and in what ways. So looking at good ethical choices emerged through use of inquiry, in my opinion, is really standing out as kind of the most applicable of these 5 different lenses in this scenario. And then last is altruism. Love thy neighbor is how this is summed up, viewed by advocates of this lens as the ultimate ethical standard. Really, it's essentially summed up in helping out every single person, regardless of any background, giving whatever that individual needs, but in the sense of a 50% floor, is it really being applied as just giving grace? How can loving thy neighbor look? Well, loving thy neighbor can be a number of ways depending on who you're asking. And again, it's the concept of how is this affecting the student? Are we helping them out by just getting them a grade that can keep them in the conversation of passing and getting through the class? Or are we looking at helping the student develop and getting them where they need to be based on where they're starting, where the 50% floor might just kind of be ignoring the holes in some of the learning, looking at the grade. In conclusion, what is the fairness of the students that don't need the 50% floor? What is the effect on the legitimacy of a passing grade when a 50% floor is being used? What is the grade representing at this point, and what is it supposed to represent? Are we meeting that? These are all topics worth deep discussion in deciding if a 50% grading floor is ethical. Thank you.